Long ago, the people had no stories to tell. It was hard for them to live without stories, especially during the long winter nights when the snow was deep outside the lodge and the people longed for something to give meaning to their lives. If only there were something we could listen to, the people would say. But there were no storytellers and no stories to be told. In those days, in a certain village, there was a boy whose parents had died and whose other relatives would not care for him. This boy's name was Gaka, which means crow. He lived by himself in a small lodge he made from branches. Among his few possessions were a bow and some arrow, which his father had made for him. Because he had to take care of himself, he became a very good hunter. He also carried a small tobacco pouch which his mother had made, telling him that it was good to make an offering of some tobacco to thank the animal spirit whenever he was successful in hunting. The people in the village did not treat Gaka well. They made fun of him and laughed at his ragged clothes. Finally, one autumn, Gaka decided to leave the village and find a better place to live. He traveled for many days. He walked and walked until he came to a place where a long stone stood. It looked like a good place to camp. He made a fire and sat in front of it, thinking about his life and wishing that he had something to offer his people, something which would lead them to respect him. It was dark now, and Gaka felt lonely. He leaned back against the large stone and spoke. If only I had something interesting to hear. Give me tobacco and I will tell you something. A deep voice said. It sounded as if it came out of the earth itself. Gaka looked around and could see no one. What will you tell me? Gaka said. Give me tobacco and I will tell you something, the voice repeated. Then Gaka realized that the voice was coming from the great standing stone. He reached into his pouch and placed some tobacco at the base of the stone. Speak, grandfather, Gaka said. I will now tell a story, said the big standing stone. It was a story of the earth itself, of the woman who fell from the sky and the animals and birds who helped her. Gaka listened to the story. It was the most wonderful thing he had ever heard. He listened hard, trying to remember every detail. At the last, the story was over. Gaka waited, and the voice spoke again. When a story had been told, the great stone said, it will be a custom to give the storyteller a gift. Gaka pulled some beads from the deerskin fringe on his old, worn jacket and placed them at the base of this stone. Here, grandfather, thank you for the story. From now on, the great stone said, when one announces that they will tell a story, you must say, Nio. And when the storyteller says, ho, at any time in the story, you must answer, hey, to show that you are listening. I will now tell a story. Nio, Gaka said. Then the great stone began to relate to a tale of the animal people and how the bear's tail came to be short. Each time the stone said, ho, Gaka was quick to answer, hey. As before, Gaka listened closely, trying to remember every word of the story. Too soon the story was ended, and the great stone was silent. Then it spoke again. This is as long as my stories will go on this night. Gaka was sorry to have the stories end, but he placed a few more beads at the base of the great stone. Thank you, grandfather, he said. Then he went to sleep, trying to hold every word of the stories in his mind. When he woke the next day, he wondered if he had dreamed, but the bone beads were gone, and he found that he still remembered the stories. He had eaten all his food, so he took up his bow and arrow and went hunting. As always, his luck was good, and he managed to shoot several birds. As he circled back towards the camp was by the big stone, he came across a village. Some of the people in the village welcomed him and asked him to sit by the fire with them. As they sat there, Gaka thought of the stories. Would you like to hear something? He asked. Nio, the people said. Give me some tobacco and I will tell you the story of how the earth came to be. Each time I say ho, you answer me by saying hey. The people did as he said. They listened closely and answered each time he said ho. Before the end of his tale, everyone in the village gathered around to listen. When the story was done, they all gave him presents. They asked him for another tale, offering him more tobacco. I shall tell you how the bear lost its tail, Gaka said. Do you want to hear this story? Nio, the people said. When Gaka was done, the people begged for another story. No, Gaka said. That is the length of my stories this evening. I must return to my lodge. Then, after promising the people he would return again the next night, Gaka went back to the camp by the big standing stone, carrying his presents with him. He placed tobacco on the ground and spoke, Grandfather, I am ready to listen again. I shall now tell a story, said the deep voice of the big stone. So it went on for a long time. Each evening, Gaka would share the stories with his friends, and each night the big standing stone would tell new stories to the boy. Sometimes people from the village would follow Gaka back to his camp and see him sitting in front of the fire listening, but they could hear nothing. That voice came from the big stone was for Gaka alone to hear. One evening after finishing his storytelling, a girl about Gakka's age approached him. She handed him a decorated pouch.